thing that is dangerously close to collapse that you know about. Story 1. The movie industry is, I think, teetering on the edge way more than people think. These 200 million movies with 100 million in marketing just aren't sustainable. The current theater model for movies is dying. Rude patrons, cell phone use, and people constantly talking during movies is killing the theater. A lot of moviegoers have no respect for the people around them like they used to. Add in broken down seats and overpriced concessions, and going to the movies is becoming a disaster. Tickets and snacks is now running close to 100 for a family of 4 that I can rent for 24.95 at home within a few weeks of theater release. Most movies now are sequels, remakes, or reboots of old movies. There are very few unique storylines in Hollywood anymore. I can get a fantastic projection TV system that goes to a 150-inch TV with a full surround sound 8-speaker system for under $5,000 now. And I don't have to put up with all the from other rude patrons at home. Theater-style kettle popcorn maker for under 100. And I can pause it when I need to go pee. Story 2. Literacy rates and reading comprehension rates. Story 3. During the chip shortage, I kind of had a change in my job description from what I regularly do to checking constantly for certain chips on shadier and shadier websites in China and asking clients to up their buy from 2x normal to 10x pricing if you are lucky. The point being, everyone was scavenging weird, shady warehouses for parts they always expected to get from Tier 1 suppliers. Product lines that weren't the most profitable lines from Texas Instruments, etc., were canned, meaning a lot of engineering was done on hardware to make the parts shortage invisible to consumers. You only heard about the chip shortages in cars mainly. But you were this close to having chip shortages for toasters, microwaves, other consumer electronics, etc. on a massive scale. Then everything went back to normal just-in-time BS. And we've done not a thing to secure the supply chain again. Edit, I forgot to mention, since the people we were dealing with were overseas scalpers, the value of me doing the shopping was that I got to buy under my tiny engineering firm's name instead of clients' globally recognized brand, so that the price wasn't 20x regular that they probably would have been forced to pay. Story 4. The electrical grid is a lot less modern than you probably think, and isn't hardened at all against intentional malicious tampering. Largely, the only reason we haven't seen targeted blackouts yet is just that those who have the ability don't have the motivation to cause widespread damage. Story 5. Public schools in the USA. Been teaching 14 years. I've always loved it, even the hard parts. I don't know any teachers who still really have their whole heart in it anymore. We are all emotionally checked out, burned out beyond repair, exhausted, and barely getting through. None of us are in it for the money, so if we also aren't there for the personal fulfillment anymore, I don't know how long the health insurance will really keep us in the profession. Many districts are facing continuously declining enrollment. That means less money each year, so everything gets a little or a lot shittier. Unless there's a total overhaul of how we fund schools, this is a death spiral. School buildings are crumbling and overcrowded. The kids are not okay. COVID broke the world, and while I guess a lot of adults can overlook that, it's glaringly obvious in a school setting. I don't blame kids or families, it's deeper than that. We have been collectively failed by our government, and it is our kids who are suffering. They don't know how to function in a community. There's an epidemic of mistrust, expertise, and reliable information have lost all credibility, and the normalization of AI has eroded any sense that learning is even worthwhile. Our public schools should be the glowing centers of our communities. We should be proud of how much we spend on education, because it should matter to us that our children are able to do incredible things. We should brag about how beautiful the new middle school is and how every kid has access to the best books and equipment in every classroom. My neighbors should be excited to pay my salary and fund my classroom projects instead of having been convinced that my union exists to steal their taxes. Free public education is the best idea anyone has ever had. There are a million systems and structures within it that I desperately want to change. But the central concept of allowing every kid in America to learn enough to be able to dream big is beautiful, and I'm not ready to give up on it yet. I hope we can come together and turn the tide. Story 6. Earth's biosphere. Insects are disappearing, which will snowball up the food chain until food is affected, which will balloon already high food costs before becoming scarce altogether. But at least a few wealthy megacorps got to enjoy record quarterly profits for a while longer. Sleep well. Story 7. Home security systems. I used to install alarm systems before we would hardwire everything, every sensor, and connection to phone line. Camera systems were also hardwired and recorded locally. Then people stopped having home phones and burglars would sometimes cut telephone lines before breaking in. So everything went cellular for communication. Over the years, big companies like ADT didn't want to pay for trained and experienced installers and service technicians, so they started installing wireless sensors. Because it takes almost no training or experience to install or repair a system like this. Just plug and play, super quick installations, no wiring to worry about, Hardly any liability related to accidents in installations, no drilling or going into attics or crawl spaces. Way more cost-effective for them, especially since ADT also owned the manufacturing companies that made the products. Then people started to install Wi-Fi cloud-based cameras like Ring and Arlo. That ceased to function if they lost connectivity, versus hardwired cameras with local DVRs. Everything got easier and faster and streamlined. Only problem is that what this means is the entirety of someone's security is contingent on open-air communication of wireless signals. Now you can go online and buy cheap jammers that will kill Wi-Fi, 4G LTE, and wireless alarm sensors. Before you would have to cut phone lines and disable sirens, and take DVRs with you to circumvent a person's security system. Now in the majority of homes you can just turn on a high-powered portable jammer and walk right in. The alarm won't trigger, because the alarm panel can receive signals from the sensors because of the interference. Even if it does, it can't call the police because the cellular signals it sends are being blocked, and Wi-Fi cameras won't even leave you with any usable footage. Worst yet, a lot of small business are set up this same way. Not all, a lot still do hardwired, but every day more and more are being upgraded to wireless equipment, less hardwired systems are being installed. Story 8. Perhaps personal privacy. I bought some snowballs, a snack cake from Walmart. The same day there was an ad here on Reddit for the same thing. Did they share data? We are giving our preferences like on Netflix to someone's enormous database, and the AI is probably right now trying to figure how I am going to vote. Story 9. The wind turbine industry, and possibly the entire power generation industry as a whole, in a few years. Possibly. How many turbine manufacturers can you name off the top of your head? How many are in the market? Like large wind turbines, the ones that power the grid, not the little ones you have that can maybe charge your phone over 3 days. One of those companies is Gamesa. They were bought out by the energy division of Siemens a few years back, and Siemens sold off their energy division to operate by itself a few years after that. All right. So, new company, not exactly a small company, but not exactly under big Siemens protection anymore. So, Siemens Gamesa, as they're known now, tried a new design with their turbines. It worked great. It sold well, really well, too well. There was a critical flaw in the bearing. You know, the single part that holds the spinny bit to the not spinny bit. The part that would send the blades flying across the place if it broke. It wasn't a maintenance issue. It wasn't an installation issue. It was a design flaw. So there were really only two options for SE Gamesa. Recall pretty much every single turbine they've sold, or pay to maintain and replace every single turbine they've sold for a good chunk of their lifespan. As you can guess, this is not exactly great for their bottom line. Siemens Energy makes around $2 billion in profit each quarter. SE Gamesa loses around $1 billion in profit each quarter. And that number's only been growing due to other issues discovered. There's really only 4 manufacturers of large gas turbines around the world. LGTs are vital for the grid because of ramp rates. Because we don't exactly have a great way to store excess electricity right now. To put it in a really simplified way, your power production must perfectly match power demand. Otherwise, the frequency of your AC output goes out of sync. Too much power, and AC frequency goes too high. Too little power, and the frequency drops too low. All it takes to fry most electrics is 1 Hz out of tune. Everything would fizzle, pop, and possibly explode. Your phone charger and laptop, though they can be replaced. How about, oh, I don't know, every single traffic light, hospital computer, radio towers, and quite literally everything plugged into AC power. So like, yeah, you have to match production with demand. This is why solar, wind, and other renewables are not able to fully replace fossil fuel and hydropower. They are unpredictable, and the fast-ramping fossil fuels can pick up the slack when, say, a cloud moves in, or the winds slow down. Natural gas turbines are generally considered the cleanest and most effective of the fast-ramping power plants. Coal is cheaper but more dirty. Nuclear is much cleaner but super expensive and political high. We're building a nuclear power plant next door, and hydroelectric dams are amazing. But you can't exactly dam up a river that people have built a city on. This is why almost every local and state-level government have been replacing coal plants with natural gas plants. So, if the Siemens Gamesa fiasco gets any worse, Siemens Energy as a whole could go under. Demand for gas turbines have also been skyrocketing due to data centers and AI, so they're filling their order books with orders that they cannot deliver as to not lose market share. Eventually, it would reach a breaking point. Would you stick around in a line for a movie if the queue was 3 weeks, even if you've paid deposit? Of course, the reasonable response for any company with too much demand they cannot keep up with is to expand. Problem. It takes money to expand. Games is eating all of that up. So they're bleeding cash, writing checks they cannot cash, but at least they've got demand and could expand slowly over time? TPG is a private equity firm. I do not need to tell you how bad PE is for a struggling corporation. They saw the Gamesa situation and stepped in and bought a bunch of shares in it. What did they do to make things better? Gamesa released a press release saying how they are divesting in the Indian market. What they actually said was that TPG forced Gamesa to transfer its orders to other companies that TPG owned. In short, TPG cannibalized Gamesa's order book in one of the fastest-growing markets. And remember, Gamesa had their best quarter since like 2020, and they've still lost $1 billion this quarter. So imagine you have a hot dog stand. You randomly decided to buy a lemonade stand one day, and it's eating half of your profits. Profits you would have spent expanding production of your hot dogs, which are selling out like crazy. You spend money from hot dogs you didn't even deliver yet to expand your market, all while a private equity firm is directing your customers to a different company's hot dog stand. The very private equity firm that now owns a good chunk of your own hot dog stand and is eyeing up buying another big chunk. I'm not saying that there would only be 3 companies to buy large gas turbines from, but your local politicians might find it hard to buy a natural gas power plant for cheap if Siemens Energy goes under, especially since those 3 manufacturers kind of have a defined home turf to sell to: water levels in the Great Salt Lake. We had a couple winters of good snowfall to delay things, but the trend is pretty clear. Without some major interventions, we're likely going to see the collapse of the brine shrimp populations, which in turn will mean millions of dead migratory birds piling up. As levels continue to decrease, all the toxic mining runoff that's accumulated over many years will steadily become airborne as the mud turns to dust. Cadmium, arsenic, cobalt, lead, and all kinds of will accumulate in your lungs just by breathing. The entire valley will likely become completely uninhabitable within a couple decades. Story 10. The advertising industry. Soon we will just have a bunch of AI bots advertising to each other as humans are disenfranchised from the internet and social media. So, extension of the dead internet theory. Story 11. Fuel pipelines in the USA. Most people don't even know how many pipelines there are. They are old, and they are leaking everywhere. There is a pipeline running to every airport, bus terminal, train station, fakery, and who knows what else. You have to dig deep, but you can find some pipeline maps. All of those pipelines are 80 years old, and they leak into the ground. The only way that pipeline leaks get detected is when people actually find them. The company that runs them is not searching for leaks. The only way they can test a section of pipe is to shut it down and pressure test it. They will not ever do that voluntarily. Too much money lost. People find leaks when it leaks into their well water or when it pollutes a river. These companies do not care about the environment. They are prepared to be sued, and they expect to be sued. Story 12. The function of government and its ability to actually do what is required. I work for a crown agency in Canada that has 3,500 employees and 600 managers. Think about that ratio for a moment. The reason your government service levels are eroding is because of the top-heavy management all needing people to fill in their Excel spreadsheets all the time. Everything is about administrative results. It's nothing but meetings, always in the middle of the day on the manager's schedule, which interferes with the flow of work cause you're always having a meeting. During COVID, managers did nothing but Zoom meetings coming up with work projects for the staff. But then they realized they had to wait for the work to come back for review. So what did they do to look busy? Come up with more projects, of course. The never-ending cycle of new innovative ideas hasn't stopped since, and all staff just roll from managers' pet project meetings to another at the sacrifice of the work they were hired to do. Story 13. Universities. The recent cuts in science funding and other state cuts are going to drastically change the way universities operate. I also think with AI and the cost of tuition, traditional higher education is going to have to do some soul-searching to keep alive. Many young men don't want to go to universities anymore either. Story 14. Not currently, but in the 2008 financial crisis, people don't recognize that we were mere hours away from the ATM stopping to work and an old-fashioned bank run. It would have been a total collapse of the financial system, late 1929, but global. The Fed guaranteeing the money market funds wouldn't break the buck, and to a lesser extent lifting the $250K cap on FDIC insurance prevented that at the 11th hour. Story 15. TV as we know it. The rise of streaming has decimated the cable TV industry, and they're still falling. ATSC 3.0 and the emergence of digital rights management will eliminate over-the-air TV unless someone in government stops it. I can see a very near future where over-the-air TV ceases, and it's a myriad of streaming providers for sports and local news. Local news and sports are the only real things keeping live network TV afloat. It's only a matter of time before local news is streaming only, and sports like the NFL grasp the almighty dollar and go streaming. If the NFL told Eagles fans they needed to pony up 29 for the season to watch Eagles games on TV, how many Eagles fans would revolt? Of those who revolted, how many would resort to watching the games at bars, restaurants, or that buddy of yours who bought the package? TV as we know it is ready to go the way of the card catalog, dial-up internet, and the MP3 player. Story 16. Telecommunications infrastructure. Construction has a limited view of the regional network and is usually lacking technical expertise, and all the folks who were patchworking it together on the engineering side got laid off for Indian subcontractors. BTW. It's not one ISP, but all of them. Story 17. Society. COVID should have brought us together. It should have unified the globe. Everyone is just out to get theirs now. Late-stage capitalism couldn't have asked for a better event. Story 18. Not sure if this qualifies, but as an American, if you're the child of a baby boomer, you should not expect to receive much, if any, inheritance. I work in elder law. Baby boomers are living much longer than the generations before them, yet many will require assisted living soon. ALF can cost 10–15K a month, plus medications and everything else. So, if you're hoping for an inheritance, now is the time to make a different plan. I know this is grim, but I thought it might be relevant. Story 19. The economy as it stands. Everything's leaning on promises and assurances. Value as people think about it is an illusion built by mass suspension of disbelief that money functions well as a vehicle for comparative exchange. Story 20. Thwaites Glacier, also known as the Doomsday Glacier. It currently is responsive for 4 of annual sea level rise, and its collapse will lead to approximately 25 inches of sea level rise, displacing billions of people. Story 21. The U.S. In multiple ways. I usually don't care about politics, but this administration makes me angry. We've got a leader out for vengeance against anyone and everyone, and brain-dead bots are falling all over him like he's a god. Meanwhile, prices are going up. I have been in my current job for 7 years. I have never seen inflation like this. And yes, it is due to tariffs. I work for a major player in the auto parts industry. I have several co-workers that have been with our company 30+ years. They too said they've never seen anything like this. This is the first time in our company's very long history that they were not able to offer us annual raises. They are also having to cut hours, which is something they've never done before because business is down. And the frightening part is this is our busy season. And no, this is not the fault of our business and poor planning. There's only so much a company can do in the current economy. That's just the start of it. I could continue to go on, but frankly, I don't have the energy to relive it all. People with a brain that aren't simps for that orange baboon see it too. And the simps aren't even worth drawing a breath to talk to. Story 22. I went to see Friendship with my wife this past Sunday. It was 34 and some change. I got a can of seltzer water and nachos. That was little under 20. For the first time, I thought this wasn't worth the price. I also saw the new Mission Impossible move alone last week, and I came away feeling that the price to see a movie is out of control. I learned that the studios are tacking on $1.52 orzu on top of the price of tickets. It's like a big U to everyone that cares about supporting a movie when it's shown in a theater. I figure I'll just go on the discount days to see what I would like. It's cool that the theater chains are stepping up and doing the cool popcorn bucket and drink cups. But it might be too little too late. Story 23. The entire research enterprise in the U.S. Many grant-supported projects, even those that still have funding, have not been reimbursed by the federal government for weeks to months. Schools are going to extraordinary lengths to make it work, but eventually, the bill will come due. I cannot overstate the damage this will cause if it's not resolved. Machinery, technology, biological samples, massive longitudinal cohorts, everything many people don't realize that drives $9 trillion of GDP directly and through the resulting commercial ventures is crashing down. It's sad. I'm a scientist. Story 24. The BQE in New York City. I'm not an expert, but essentially the fact that it's made of iron doesn't work well when it snows, and rock salt is poured to melt the snow, because the salt also breaks down the iron. It's also just not kept in good condition and carries far too much weight for what it was made for. Solutions have been proposed. But closing down the only major bridge between Brooklyn and Queens is complicated, and so the current plan is basically just waiting until they have to do something about it, which just means until it collapses. Story 25. Huge sectors of the job market. I oversee a large corporate communications team. We are still better than AI, but it's catching up very fast. I'm pretty sure that within a few years, the most important skill set is going to be knowing how to enter good prompts and to check the output. Story 26. A workforce for the trades. I work in HVAC. The people who have the most experience and knowledge are retiring quicker than the workforce is being replenished by new people. There's going to be a huge gap in work that needs to be done, and the ability to do it in the next 10 years. Story 27. Practically 99 of all the railroad bridges in the United States are over 100 years old. On top of that, the last time most of them were painted, we still used lead paint. The cost to remove the paint in an environmentally friendly way is too expensive according to the railroad companies. That means most of them haven't been repainted since the early 90s. Story 28. I grew up going to the Cayman Islands a lot in the 90s and early 2000s. I just went and was shocked the reefs were about 90 dead from what I remember. I remember huge brain corals. Now there's some small alive spots on what looks like it was a big brain coral. I remember forests of elkhorn coral on the barrier reef of North Sound. Now it's all gone. That didn't take long. But all the tourists diving and snorkeling I encountered seem to think it's great and have no idea what they are seeing is basically dead nature compared to just 12 a generation ago. Story 29. Depending on what you mean by dangerously close to collapse, perhaps the Ogallala Aquifer, a massive underground water source in the American high plains. It is facing a critical threat of depletion due to over-extraction for irrigation, supports US $35 billion in crop production annually, and is being drained faster than it can naturally recharge. The long-term consequences include potential damage to local communities, declining drinking water supplies, and the potential for irreversible damage to the aquifer. Story 30. The United States. The government is focused on bullshit issues while the country rots from the inside out. See crumbling infrastructure, declining education standards, unaffordable healthcare, a lack of affordable housing, increasing inequality, social security on the brink, reduced worker protections, anti-intellectualism, rise in right-wing extremism, etc. Story 31. The pension system in like 3/4 of Europe. The European version of baby boomers, people born in the late 50s and early 60s, are retiring right now, and there are simply not enough young people to pay for their pensions. It will only get worse as birth rates are collapsing and people are getting more and more opposed to immigrants coming in. Story 32. I have read that the managers of the New York subway mostly pray they'll retire before it fails. It's got a lot of period 1930s equipment, and you just can't take a major line down long enough to upgrade it. Story 33. Medical care in the United States. Doctors, now doctor for instead of for care. There was a tipping point where the majority used to be doctoral who went into the field because they wanted to help people. Now the majority openly admit it is because in the US, the sky is the limit on income, especially for specialists. All you need to do is take blood tests and prescribe meds, sometimes with its own kickback benefits, and refer people to the next doctor. Story 34. The Islamic Republic of Iran, a kleptocracy cloaked under a thin veil of theology, governing a largely secular population. It has completely lost any ideological legitimacy it ever had. It is faced with a collapsing economy, hyperinflation, and an inability to provide its citizens with the most basic services. All of this in a country that is extremely resource-rich. Combine this with the heavy defeats of its regional puppet states and proxy groups, and increasing Western pressure regarding their nuclear program, and the writing is on the wall. Oh yeah, and it doesn't help that they're off the Europeans by providing the cheap drones Russia uses against Ukraine. Story 35. Economic systems designed to continually increase the speed and scope of our exploitation of Earth's resources while simultaneously polluting our habitable space. Story 36. The Army Corps of Engineers had been warning the city and state that the levees around NOLA wouldn't hold up in a Category IV hurricane as far back as the Carter administration. We all know how that turned out with Katrina. That's one case in one state in the US. There are likely hundreds of other examples. Story 37. The tomb radioactive waste from nuclear bomb testing in the 1950s was stored in a concrete dome in the Marshall Islands. This dome is decaying and letting radioactive waste leak into the Pacific. Story 38. Commercial real estate. It's the real reason RTO is such a big push for corporate. No in-person office jobs means millions of SQFT of office space is empty in downtown metro areas. Plus, we have the 90s, 2000s era restaurant chains, all going bankrupt, leaving empty restaurant vacancies. And to add to that, chain retail stores are dying at alarming rates, adding more empty buildings. This all adds up to a lot or available space that no one wants to rent. Story 39. Grain of salt here. But I remember an oil gas recruitment style lecture at a university in Scotland. The executive, who also claimed fracking was good for the environment, casually told the students that when they built a new rig, they just connected the pipeline to the next one. So there's one main pipe coming into Aberdeen, going through what must be dozens of abandoned, unmaintained rigs before reaching the nice new oil fields. Always seemed like a disaster waiting to happen to me. No one tell Russia. Story 40. Literacy. Kids who read novels are getting super rare. Some teachers report that trying to get kids to read anything longer than a couple of sentences is increasingly difficult. A sense of nuance? Increasingly rare too. These people have a narrow vocabulary, can't figure out long sentences, and will have trouble with nuanced text. Language is a tool for thinking, and reading novels has been found to increase the ability to empathy. Story 41. The US's, and by extension Canada's electrical grid. If the 2003 Northeastern blackout is anything to go by as a litmus test, factor in that most of our equipment is deteriorating, and spares can only be purchased from other countries that are still the US's competition, China, etc. Plus the fact that the Department of Energy is now run by a bunch of morons. This ain't looking good. We've already been using jet fuel for decades to power generators as an emergency backup in case there's a power sag somewhere, to avoid a cascade failure. I don't have a great measure of confidence that it can keep up without catastrophe happening. Story 42 Gaming journalists at traditional publications print internet. It's been known for quite some time that N-shiftification hit the gaming journalism scene pretty hard back in 2012-2015. And in 2025, it looks like this has matured into a full-blown career reaper for many journalists. Basically, the TLDR is a ton of publications were bought up by many major corporations and gutted their workforce. Worse, many suspect these jobs are not coming back. Industry giants like Polygon, effectively dead. One more corpse among many that will be puppeted by large media organizations for as long as they can for clickbait lowbrow journalism, and then shut down when they inevitably lose their audience due to disinterest. Rinse and repeat. And the trend is accelerating. Kotaku is suspected to be next. The rot is easily traceable too, with many of these sites relying more on dubious ad providers and less on user traffic. It's getting to the point that, now, the recommendation if you want to report on gaming news is you're going to have to be your own publication with your own brand a la YouTube and social media. Nobody is going to hire you to do that anymore, not en masse. As for why this is happening, couple of reasons: loss of consumer trust, consumers have better options, YouTube mainly, rising costs, and shitification. On top of that, a lot of the content the current gaming journalists facing layoffs were putting out can easily be done by AI, as the content most gaming journalists were putting out was cookie-cutter articles designed to rage clickbait as many users as possible. Quality doesn't really matter, as quality wasn't a factor in the first place. LLM can easily put out thousands of clickbaity articles for a fraction of the price. I want to be clear here. Gaming journalism itself isn't dead, nor is it facing collapse, but how it's done, yeah, that's not going to be around in another couple of years. It'll also say many of the things I mentioned here are probably going to happen to the mainstream media as well. It's only a matter of time. Story 43. The job market. The combination AI and robots could take over the work of a large percentage manual labor and tech jobs. Those are just the two obvious ones. Who knows how many other careers they will replace. Story 44. Any actual education that teaches a life skill here in the USA. With these insane measures, actual education is growing underground because of the woke thing, or whatever these manics in charge are talking about. That's what dictatorships do. They hunt down any intellectual willing to put their foot. Yes, I'm aware of the usual suspects, but this happens on both ends of the political spectrum. Story 45. Power grid in the US, particularly Northeast PJM. It's not going to fall down one day, but it's slowly falling apart, and no one seems to be interested in making the necessary fixes. Story 46. The U.S. housing market new construction is particularly alarming to me. They have more units than transactions. Units are sitting partially finished to conceal actual numbers. They are buying down rates so dramatic they undercut most of their margin. And worst of all, they are slashing prices in order to move inventory and reducing the value for those who bought earlier this year, leaving folks owing more than their home is worth now. On top of that, foreclosures are rising, particularly in the markets that boomed during COVID. I've also noticed larger national builders are also buying up smaller regional builders, so I'm also afraid we are rapidly losing quality options. Looking at you, Leonard. Story 47. Our belief in the American dream, neighbor helping neighbor, the ability not to interfere with someone else's life choices. If you don't like what someone does, stop and leave. Story 48. The electric grid. My engineers at work laugh that if we all went home and had to plug in an electric vehicle, the grid would fail miserably. I'm all for green power and everything that comes with it, but until we fix how power gets from point A to B, we are kind of bottlenecked. Story 49. Okay. If anyone has ever been there, back me up. In the A-train subway, headed just past where it splits toward Rockaway rather than Lefferts, the Rockaway trains go around an elevated turn. Especially on the Rockaway-bound side, it's only a matter of time until a train overturns and falls right off the side and onto the street below. I have been on roller coasters that bank less. I haven't been out there in some years, but it would be evident to anyone taking the A train toward JFK. Story 50. My garage ceiling. Discovered it was caving in and the load-bearing beams were splitting. Contractors have put in emergency supports and are coming out tomorrow to properly repair it. Story 51. Glacial systems. Things like the destruction of Blatten in Switzerland will become more and more common. Collapses in non-inhabited areas will accelerate too. Story 52. The Western world as we knew it after Cold War. Right wings are getting popular in almost every part of the world. Russia is investing heavily to corrupt our Western values since more than 10 years. They fake news everywhere, and they understand social media opinion shifts very well. At the end of my 20s, I grew up in Germany without any big problems. No wars, no big crisis after 2007's crash. Businesses were doing great, but there is this man at the Kremlin who doesn't like our Western values. I tend to say he has major influence that USA got Trump, and Germany struggles with the right-wing AfD and so on got every country. Mood in Western countries changed. A lot. Kinda afraid at the moment. Story 53. Social security. It's something that the young, supposedly politically conscious people don't think about cause they're in college and don't pay into Social Security. It's something that Republicans harped about, so if you mention any problems with it, you get painted as a conservative. But straight up, the thing doesn't scale. Plus, the government has dipped into the fund multiple times, i.e., stolen retirement money paid by the citizens for the citizens. I don't care if I get downvoted because the people downvoting me will never get any money, yet they're paying in as much as their income tax. Story 54. Wind energy. Companies responsible for maintaining wind turbines most of the time are just trying to keep the turbine in running condition until the next round of government grants rolls in. Each turbine costs an average of about $6,000, and they are repowered every 15 years or so. Repowering is the process of taking the rotor blades and hub and the nacelle white box, and the contents inside the nacelle generators, gearbox, controls off of the top of the tall white tube and replacing those things with brand new stuff. The industry is vastly understaffed. I am a traveling wind tech. I will usually hit 8 to 9 states per year, providing special troubleshooting and assistance with maintenance projects that require a little extra help. My home site has 64 turbines and 5 people on the clock, but I have been to sites with 220 turbines with 10 people on the clock, and you see how quickly these understaffed locations are getting behind on their maintenance logs. It's not just quick maintenances that involve greasing blade bearings. It's the torques and brakes and other larger, heavier components and tasks that they fall behind on. If they would have 4 or 5 more people, they could get caught up. Now, I am not saying that we are going to see thousands of turbines start falling over or exploding. Mostly, what happens is the turbine shuts down until it is taken care of, but we are going to see longer downtimes. And if some companies prioritize operating time versus good maintenance, then we may start seeing certain company names become renowned for having turbines explode in the air. Story 55. Nature. So much nature. A majority of ecosystems on this planet are a few decades or less away from collapse, due to habitat destruction, environmental toxins, and climate change. Collapse isn't sudden, but things will start to degrade and accelerate quickly when key parts of the natural food chain disappear. We are 100 on the wrong trajectory, and am 100 confident that people being born today are going to see significant food shortages and air quality issues in their lifetimes. And accelerated species extinctions are just a few decades away. At this point, we would need a global reculturing to reverse course. And even then, so much climate shift is already baked in, which is why I'm so certain we won't fix this.